I ordered a book into the library a couple of months ago. I've been wanting to read this for ages and the library didn't have it, and I thought instead of buying it for myself, why not get the library to do it for me? So it's finally come in. I'm gonna go pick it up now, and then we're gonna do a reading vlog specifically dedicated to this book. It is a Christmas rom-com, so it is perfect timing. I cannot wait to dive in. Let's go. Okay, I'm back from the library. As you have seen in the previous clips, the book that I ordered and borrowed is The Nightmare Before Kissmas. I wanted to borrow this because I heard that it was a love story between the Prince of Christmas and the Prince of Halloween or something like that, which I thought was a really interesting idea. First impressions, it's good. It's fine. I've read a lot of books in my lifetime, so by now I'm pretty good at recognizing when a writing style or tone is not for me, so I can DNF pretty quickly. But so far this is working for me. There are some romances though where the writing almost feels like there are too many words to describe one thing that is happening. I don't know how to fully explain that, but I feel like if you know, you know. It's kind of like when you over-explain a tiny 1 second scene or an event that would happen in 1 second in real life. I've only read a couple of pages, but it's got that slight feeling, but it's not as bad as some other books. I think part of it is also because it is setting up the world. It is a contemporary romance book, but it does have that whole kind of fantasy element in that Christmas and Halloween is real in the form of people. Some of the language overuse is, I think, just because of the world building. The other thing that I am trying to hold off judgment for now, because I want to see how it plays out, and also because this is meant to be a fun, silly romance, I'm trying not to think about it too much. Like, it's not meant to be this huge thing that needs to have all the answers. But I feel this way about most Christmas movies. All I can think is, in reality, Santa isn't real, but kids think they're real. In the movies, they are real and they give presents to the kids, but in the movies, the parents don't think Santa is real, so they still give presents. So then where does the extra presents come from? That's like a logic in Christmas movies that I don't understand because they never address it. It's slightly similar to this at the moment. I assume there's gonna be more world building, more explanations later on, but that sort of logic doesn't really make sense to me. Also, there is a bit where it mentions like all the holidays, and then I started thinking about how a lot of these holidays, which are very commercialized and westernized now, they started off very differently back then. So they talked about Valentine's Day, St. Patrick's Day, Christmas, but all of those didn't really start as the holidays that we know them as now. They all come from some kind of pagan religious story or something like that, and they all had kind of darker beginnings. So then I started overthinking that part a bit too much. I was like, I don't think Valentine's Day is Valentine's Day back then, and neither is Christmas. So I don't know why you're talking about the reputation of your holidays when these holidays didn't start as what they are now. But again, I think I need to just like switch that part of my brain off and not think too much about the logic in Christmas movies / books, because if I do that, I'm gonna drive myself crazy and then I won't be able to enjoy the book. But anyway, I will check back in when I have more to say about the book. Okay, mentioned yesterday about the overwriting of a lot of the scenes. Still stand by that. That's still happening. World building, I have learned to let it go. I'm not thinking too much about that part of it. Like I said, silly rom-com, don't need to dwell on that part, but there is something that has pulled me up short, and this is going to be spoilery. So it does happen within like the first 20 or so pages. This is also part of the reason why it bothers me so much. I will now do a spoiler part with the time skip, so you don't have to watch it. I prefer slow burn in my romances, like a very slow burn. There can be insta lust as long as there isn't actually a true connection between the characters yet, and then that part gets developed slowly. But in this case, there is a kiss 20 pages in. I could feel it going towards that part, and I was really hoping it wouldn't. It did, but the kiss wasn't just insta lusting either. It was off the back of a semi-deep conversation. I mean, as deep as could be between two strangers who talked for like 2 minutes. But it did annoy me and is throwing me off. And then right after that, we do have a time skip of 1.5 years. But I don't count that as still slow burn if you've already built this connection and then you skip time. Like, slow burn isn't about the actual time period. It's about how fast the development is within a certain amount of time. Does that make sense? So not a huge fan of the story so far, not a huge fan of the romance, but as I'm still so early on in the book, I am gonna keep going and try to reserve too much of my judgment. Wow, I really did know the bare minimum when I started this. So I knew it was about the Prince of Halloween and the Prince of Christmas, but I didn't quite realize the rest of the setup of the story. I did read the blurb just before I talked about this next part because I wasn't sure if it was going to be a spoiler or not. It isn't if you read the blurb, but essentially the main character, Cole, who is the Prince of Christmas, his full name is Nicholas. He gets kind of blindsided into an arranged marriage with his best friend, who is one of the princesses of Easter, I think it is. The love interest, the one who he kissed like 2 minutes after meeting, he apparently is going to be, I haven't gone up to this part yet, he is going to be competing for the princess's hand as well. I really don't understand the world building of this. So you essentially have this holiday world where all the holidays have their own kind of reality, but they exist alongside the real world. So they have all this magic to make sure the real world doesn't actually know that they exist. There's like paparazzi, reporters, all that stuff, but in the real world they're just seen as foreign royalty. I don't know, it's weird. And then there's a part in the book where the King of Christmas, I still don't understand if he's actually Santa Claus or not. They're the Claus family, and I think he is. Yeah, anyway, he announces to the reporters that Easter has begun the search for a marriage partner for Princess Iris, and that Nicholas Cole, the main character, is going to be courting her, and they expect an engagement by the end of the season. Santa Claus, the King of Christmas, mentions as well to the reporters, the union between Christmas and Easter will strengthen what has long been at the crux of both our enterprises, joy. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like the crux of both their enterprises is Jesus, Christianity. So I think that's the part that I mentioned yesterday that confuses me about the world building, is that these holidays, most of them are based on religious practices dating way back when. It doesn't really bother me that much because I'm an atheist, but I just don't get how we're meant to completely look past it. It just feels like it's such a glaring plot hole or just like a weird part of reality that we're not addressing, considering that this world exists alongside the real world. I feel like as I'm reading this, I'm finding more faults with it than I am good parts. I really was just hoping to sit down and read a fun, silly little Christmas rom-com, but instead I'm just questioning everything about the writing of this book. So the main trio, we have Prince Nicholas, Cole, the person whose book it is in the point of view of, and then we have Princess Iris, who is the Princess of Easter, who is the one who's betrothed to Cole, and then we have Chris, who is Cole's little brother. Chris, like K-R-I-S, Kris Kringle. And they have a text message chain that the book includes, like this. And honestly, it gives me vibes of all the text chains between all the different groups in Red, White, and Royal Blue. And the vibe of the banter in this is so reminiscent of the type of conversations we see in Red, White, Royal Blue. And I'm not saying it's like copying it, and I know a lot of books have text threads in the book, but I don't know, it gives very, very similar vibes, like it's trying to do the same thing. Got up to the part where the princes have their first proper conversation after their first encounter. I feel like I would like this romance more if their meet cute had been longer, developed better, and didn't feel so sudden and random. I think that's one of the reasons why I have a problem with this book, is that I feel like that first encounter just wasn't fleshed out enough, and it makes their relationship a lot more unbelievable. Also, the more I read this, the more I compare it to Red, White and Royal Blue. The writing style is very, very similar, and even though the story at its core isn't exactly the same, there are very similar themes. But instead of exploring the question of how to use your position in royalty and politics and the power you have there to help those who actually need it, instead of making the rich richer, it's more about how to stop the growing commodification and capitalization of holidays like Christmas and go back to old traditions and actually exacting a meaningful change. So yeah, that's a big thing at the moment in this book. So even though it is a romantic comedy, it definitely has big themes of capitalism. I actually checked the Goodreads page of this because I wanted to see if anyone else was seeing the similarities, and one of the comp titles used is actually Red, White and Royal Blue, which I had no idea. So I started with that comparison entirely unrelated to having seen the summary of this book. And by comp title, I mean that, you know, with a lot of blurbs of books, it's like, oh, when this meets this. It's not just the text messages anymore. It's just the way that the inner monologue of the prince goes. It's so similar to Alex in Royal Blue. I need to stop saying the full name of that book because it's annoying me. The main characters are just so similar to each other in that respect. The way they talk, the way they think, and then also the way that they are perceiving their love interest as well, and the way the love interest comes off. All so similar. Every scene in this book is so overwritten. Every scene just drags out for so long. What could be done in a couple of paragraphs is dragged out to multiple pages. It really throws the whole pacing off. So my initial observation about how overwritten this book is, I think was very accurate, and I hate that. I was hoping it was just like the start of a book kind of thing. Sometimes the start of a book is like that while they try to set the story, but no, I'm getting through it, but it really just drags every scene out way too much, and it just annoys me. All right, so I have more thoughts yesterday, but I didn't get a chance to film the update, so I'm just gonna read out my notes. Earlier on in the vlog, I think, I mentioned commodification. Well, I forgot to mention that the currency in their world is joy. So because of that, the word joy is used so many times that it has lost all meaning for me. But also, the more joy they have, the more magic they can harness. So I guess if we're going along with the metaphor or the analogy, magic is like power in the real world. So essentially, the higher their joy meter, I'm pretty sure they mentioned the joy meters in the book, so I don't think I'm making that up. The higher it is, the more magic they can wield. Again, the world building in this is so weird. It's equal parts really detailed and makes no sense at all, like lacking real substance. I don't mean this to sound robotic. I wrote a lot of notes. I'm literally just gonna read them out. And then later on in the book, there is a sentence here that goes, traditions change, and what was once a celebration of a god becomes a celebration of a harvest, evolving with the ways people grow or forcibly with colonization. Which is a wild sentence to read in this book. I keep saying it's meant to be a rom-com because I really thought it was, and that's how it's marketed, but it's actually just a political drama, but the politics is between different holidays. I don't understand, like, what is going on? And all the stakes in this book seem so ridiculous as well, like all the stakes that they've made up. I mean, everything in a fiction book is made up, right? But just the way that it's handled here, it just sounds so out of left field, or it just feels so strange. Like, it's so ridiculous. I can't take it seriously. And I think I'm meant to. Like, the way the author has written this book has made everything seem so serious, and I can't take it seriously. Okay, there's also this other thing, which I don't know if it's a minor thing or not, but it's been used twice now, and I can't get over it. It really drew me out of the book both times it was used. When the author is talking about something like remaining untouched, for example, the King of Christmas leaving that holiday untouched and not trying to influence it in any way, the author uses the word unmolested. It's such a strange word to use in this context, I feel. And I think also because earlier the author had used the word assaulted to also kind of mean the same thing. And I know technically it means that, but I feel like it has certain connotations that it feels strange to use that word in a romantic comedy. So yeah, just a little, I don't know, just a thing that kind of bothered me. I also talked about how a lot of scenes are overwritten in that something that happens maybe in a couple minutes, in 30 seconds or whatever, in real life is written in the book in a way that makes it feel like it's taking 3 times as long. For example, there was a scene where they were on a bench to put on ice skates and then they needed to walk towards the gates of the ice skating rink. So obviously like walking in ice skates takes a long time. I know that. And the characters are purposefully walking a bit slower than normal. But at the same time, there are photographers and people waiting for them to get on the rink, like watching them. I don't understand how this 30-second at most walk took 6 pages of dialogue. Like they're talking for 6 pages long, which I know you can't really compare that in time, but just reading it, I'm like, this is going on for so long and it just takes me out because it just feels so unnatural in my head. Like I play the whole book in my head like a movie and the flow just doesn't work. Like this scene needs to be cut by 4 pages at least. And then this is the last kind of note until I'm up to date. After or during, I guess, a romantic moment between the 2 love interests, there's this sentence. It's so long with so many commas that it loses any effect that it's meant to have. I'll read the sentence out. Someone help me, please, because this guy makes me want to learn hymns, but only recite them if I'm moaning. And I think that might be sacrilege, but I'm okay with damnation if he's the reason. I just want to know for sure which way is up. It's so long. And the part where it says, I just want to know for sure which way is up, I honestly thought that was a full stop because the sentence was already so long, but it's not, it's a comma. So this whole paragraph, I have it on my phone. I probably should just show the book, but the book I left upstairs and these are my notes. But I took a photo of the book and that is the sentence, but it's like a whole paragraph long. So I got a little bit distracted. I just got my nails done today. They're Christmas themed. So they're like a French red tip with a little bow. How cool are they? I'm really happy with them. Anyway, sorry. I mean, it suits the theme of this Christmas vlog. I'm having so many thoughts about this book and I don't think any of them are good. There's something about the writing that is a little bit addicting to read. Like it's easy to read and I just want to know what happens next. Everything that happens is just so ridiculous that I can't like get sucked in. I am not invested in any of the characters. They all feel like shallow versions of what they could be. Also because of all this political drama and low-key like blackmailing espionage, it takes up so much of the book. The romance just falls so short. We're meant to be feeling all this chemistry and all these emotions between the love interests, but I don't feel any of it. I don't understand why they like each other. I don't understand their connection. Just nothing. So that's cool. I don't think it's gonna go up from here, honestly. So I'm just gonna try to finish it as quickly as I can so I can stop reading it. I'm really sad that the only Christmas book and romance that I'm reading during this holiday season is kind of a dud, but it is what it is. This was such a slog to get through. There were so many times I wanted to pick up my camera and record a rant basically after every page, but it would have gotten way too repetitive, just like the main characters in a monologue. I feel like even though this book was about 350 or so pages, nothing actually happened because most of the pages were filled with the same things over and over again, like the same worries, the same problems, and it just wouldn't go anywhere. The book would act like these are new revelations that are coming to light, but they really weren't. I finished this book. I think I'm gonna rate it a 1.5 stars. It actually was pretty bad. I think I might have DNF'd it if I wasn't already committed to filming this reading vlog. And look, there were some parts that did keep me going. I think the writing was easy enough to follow along and get into the rhythm of. I just never really liked it. I think I mentioned in an earlier update that the characters felt like shallow versions of themselves, and that pretty much stayed accurate throughout the whole book. I won't rehash everything I've already mentioned in previous updates, but none of the problems I had with it ever actually got better. It just got more annoying to read as I went through the book. I think one of the main problems with this book is that the author almost tried to make the world building too complex, and then it ended up making not much sense at all. If she'd kept the world building just a little simpler, I think it would have been easy to go along with the story and the setup of the story being all about holidays and heirs to these holidays. But because she just added too much stuff to the setup of the world, it ended up creating more questions than it did answers. And it just also made the story way more confusing and convoluted than it needed to be. The holiday politics of it all just felt so ridiculous. It almost felt like it was blown out of proportion. Like, I'm sure in the world itself it makes sense, but because of the way it was handled, it just didn't really make sense to us, the readers. At least it didn't for me. And then also because so much was spent on the same problems and same thoughts over and over again, the romance had basically no development. At a certain point, when the main characters properly got together, they kept talking and acting like they've been together for so long, or they've known each other for so long, or they know each other so well, probably is the main thing. But it didn't really make sense because they hadn't actually interacted that much at all. And when they did, not much was actually revealed about themselves, who they were, what they believed in. I just never believed in their romance, and I didn't fall for them. I saw no chemistry. I didn't understand the spark that they had, why they were drawn to each other. None of it worked. The marketing of this book felt very inaccurate to what it was, but I don't really know on whose side the fault is for that. In the acknowledgements, the author does mention that this idea stemmed from a more serious fantasy-heavy Christmas book that she was writing. And I think her other books are very fantasy-heavy as well, so maybe that was why it felt a bit weird, but I honestly think she should have scrapped even more of the world building when it pivoted into a romance book. But yeah, that is my very disappointing review of The Nightmare Before Christmas. At the start of this vlog, I mentioned being so excited for this book, ordering it into the library, it being one of my anticipated reads for this year, and it's let me down, unfortunately. If any of you have read this book, please let me know your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to discuss. According to the Goodreads reviews, there are a lot of people who actually did enjoy this book. I just wasn't one of them. I couldn't turn my brain off. None of it made sense. It didn't work for me. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.